Nations that receive no mercy will not be left standing in the world to come. They will face divine judgment due to their defiance against the Most High's laws and for their actions towards the children of Israel. Let's explore the prophecies to identify which nations will be restored and those destined for destruction. In the last session, we talked about these 5 nations: Assyria, Elam, Moab, Ammon, and Egypt, and the prophecies regarding their restoration in the latter days. Their lands and identity will also be restored. They will also submit to the worship of the Most High. All of these nations neighbored the Promised Land, and they were also in conflict with the children of Israel. So understanding the prophecies concerning them can give us some insight into current events and the consequences for nations that participated in the oppression or enslavement of Yah's people. I focused on Moab first because I could not understand why mercy would be extended to this nation, considering the many times they came against the chosen people. But rarely do we consider King David's connection to the nation. Yes, his great-grandmother was Ruth, but I want to look at another event that happened when David was on the run from Saul. He received help from those who were considered enemies of Israel because Saul wanted him dead. This comes from 1 Samuel 22, 1 through 4. The backstory is that David sought help from Achish, the Philistine king of Gath. He believed that by going into Philistine territory, Saul would stop chasing him. David actually lived there for almost 1.5 years, but during that time, he was conducting secret raids against various groups, including enemies of Israel, and making Achish believe that he was attacking Israel. So this passage tells us what happened when he left there. It says, David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. Then David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, Please let my father and mother come here with you, till I know what Yah will do for me. So he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Have you thought about why David would even consider asking the king of a nation that was seen as Israel's enemy to protect his family? The Most High allowed David to receive mercy from those who were seen as enemies. So it shouldn't be that difficult to believe that the Most High would also grant mercy to those who seek Him with a pure heart. He said this in Isaiah 56, 3 through 8. Do not let the son of the foreigner who has joined himself to the Most High speak, saying, The Most High has utterly separated me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, Here I am, a dry tree. To the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths and choose what pleases me, and hold fast my covenant, even to them I will give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also, the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to the Most High to serve him and to love the name of the Most High, to be his servants. Everyone who keeps from defiling the Sabbath and holds fast my covenant, even them I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. The Most High Yah, who gathers the outcasts of Israel, says, Yet I will gather to him others besides those who are gathered to him. Here we see in Zechariah 14:16 that it says, It shall come to pass that everyone who is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Most High Yah of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. The fact that it says those who are left is an indication that they were saved from the judgment that came against their people. So we see mercy being extended to those who came against Jerusalem. They go up each year to worship Israel's king. They received mercy, and so did we. Now, after the final world judgment, we have the eternal heavenly city, the New Jerusalem, and the conditions of those who can enter. It says, and the nations of those who are saved. Well, what are they saved from? The final world judgment. They shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor into it. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. But there shall by no means enter it anything that defiles or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Now, this verse in Jeremiah 30:11 has been used to make the claim that all nations will be destroyed except for the nation of Israel during the final judgment, because it says, I will make a full end of all nations where I have scattered you. But the way it's phrased, it's referring to the loss of their national power, sovereignty, resources, and identity. And this is exactly what happened to some of the nations that we've been talking about, like Moab, Egypt, and Assyria. The original inhabitants from those nations were displaced. A remnant live in the shadows. They did not experience total extinction of every person. To test the meaning, we should see how Jeremiah uses the same phrase, full end, in other passages. The prophecy is fulfilled when their old rebellious system is destroyed and the nation falls into a subjugated role. In some cases, the city is completely destroyed, like Jericho, and only Rahab and her family remained. For those nations that receive mercy, they will be in a subdued role under the subjection of Yah's kingdom. However, for Edom, Babylon, and other nations that we'll talk about in the next session, their fate is irreversible loss. No national existence remains, no restoration as a people, no return to a former status as a people. They become symbols of judgment. They will never return to the status they once had, unlike Israel. Our restoration will place us back into our rightful place, and the other nations will have to submit to our king. Here's an example regarding Egypt from Ezekiel 29:13 through 14. Yet, thus says the Most High Yah, at the end of 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians from the peoples among whom they were scattered. I will bring back the captives of Egypt and cause them to return to the land of Pathros, to the land of their origin, and there they shall be a lowly kingdom. What we're looking at is that certain nations who were historically connected to Israel, and I didn't list all of them, receive mercy and will remain after what is called the Day of the Lord judgments. But there are also nations that will not be healed or be restored. So here is where I think some may be getting confused. They are equating the Day of the Lord judgments with the great judgment that will bring about a new heaven and a new earth. These are two different events. The phrase the Day of the Lord is described as a time of catastrophic divine intervention, and in the Old Testament, the phrase is used more than 20 times. So you should understand that the prophets used it with a dual prophecy or double fulfillment pattern. They're speaking about an immediate historical judgment on specific nations that happened in their day. But there is also wording to show that a future fulfillment of the prophecy has to happen before the final end times world judgment. For example, in Isaiah 13:6 through 9, the prophet used the term to describe the actual downfall of Babylon by the Medes. Ezekiel used the phrase to refer to Egypt's defeat by Babylon, and in Amos 5:18 through 20, the prophet warned Israel about a day of darkness that pointed to their impending Assyrian exile. So the prophets frequently declared that the day of the Lord was near to warn nations in their day of impending judgment. But some of those prophecies had a dual meaning. The prophecy in Joel 3 is an important day of the Lord prophecy because this is the judgment against some of the nations that interacted with Israel, as in some of their neighbors. They were involved in scattering some of the children of Judah. So we're talking about Tyre, Sidon, and the Philistines. They sold them to the Grecians. So this is no longer a regional transaction. Now, there are various prophecies that reflect a two-stage pattern, which is regional judgment happens first and then judgment on the world. So other prophets talked about the judgment that will come for those who scattered the Most High's people and divided his land. You find it in Joel 3, Obadiah, Amos 1 and 2, Zephaniah 2, Isaiah 11:14, Ezekiel 25 and 32. And in that one, it's specifically naming Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, and Egypt. So let's look at the big picture. The day of the Lord is a divine reset. The beast system is man's attempt to erase the Most High's boundaries, the covenant people, the order of nations based on Genesis 10, and Yah's kingship. So the day of the Lord is the Most High's response and his correction. And Esau will feel the full weight of the Most High's judgment. Edom is the only Abrahamic nation with no restoration or survival prophecy. Now, when you look at the prophecies concerning Abraham's descendants, you'll see that Jacob is the only one fully restored with covenant rights. Descendants of Ishmael and the sons Abraham had with Keturah survives, but Esau will be no more. He's never restored. Even though he mixed himself with the other nations, Obadiah 1:17 through 18 tells us that he is going to be completely destroyed, as in a total extinction. This says, "But on Mount Zion there shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness. The house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. But the house of Esau shall be stubble. They shall kindle them and devour them, and no survivor shall remain of the house of Esau, for the Most High has spoken." So when we look at the big picture, we see things happening in phases. A judgment is given against all nations, to include Israel. We were judged for our sin of disobedience, kicked out of the land, and taken into captivity. The nations that surrounded us were also judged for the way they treated us, even though many of them were used to fulfill the judgment against us. Then we see a separation of nations into two groups. Some have restoration prophecies. Then there are those with no restoration prophecies, and some of those nations will be completely destroyed. The nation of Israel is to be restored and have covenant rights and blessings restored. Some of the nations that neighbored Israel or had ties to us will be restored when we are restored. For example, we have the prophecy regarding the reconciliation of Israel with Egypt and Assyria. Keep in mind that most of the nations had their identities stolen, just like we did, but the Most High is going to bring them out of the shadows. Finally, the worldwide beast system structure will be brought down, and some nations will remain and worship while others are removed permanently. So the Joel 3 prophecy is the catalyst because it serves as the sign that nations are being placed back into their inherited lands. But it begins with us. We have to be regathered and placed back into our land as one people. Right now, the two houses are still separate, and that is why the Most High commands Ezekiel to take two sticks, one representing Judah, the southern kingdom, and one representing Joseph or Ephraim, the northern kingdom, and he tells him to join them into one. The prophecy says, "I will make them one nation in the land, and one king shall be over them all. They shall no longer be two nations." The current reality is that a people were presented to the world as the true people without the miraculous regathering and merging of the tribes ever happening. So before the final great judgment, which is the ultimate divine plan to bring about a new heaven and a new earth, the children of Israel will be restored to the land and live safely as one people before certain nations led by Gog launches an attack. This is what will bring about the final great judgment. This comes from Ezekiel 38, 1 through 6. "Now the word of the Most High came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Most High Yah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and lead you out. with all your army horses and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah from the far north and all its troops. Many people are with you. Now listen to what the Most High says to Gog in verses 7 through 8. Prepare yourself and be ready, you and all your companies that are gathered about you, and be a guard for them. After many days you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They were brought out of the nations, and now all of them dwell safely. Do you see that they are supposed to be living safely in the land? But yet Christians try to say that this prophecy has been fulfilled. They are promoting deception. The two sticks are still scattered. By the time Gog prepares to invade, Ezekiel describes Israel as a land of unwalled villages where people are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them, dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. The prophecy says Israel must be living in a state of absolute tranquil security, requiring no physical defenses. The current reality is that those who say they are us are one of the most heavily fortified nations that's on the earth. They are defined by their security walls, checkpoints, and the Iron Dome. It does not visually or politically mirror this image of living in unwalled villages. So what does this tell us? All of the nations will not be destroyed after the day of the Lord. Israel has to be back in the land. And it also tells us that these nations, Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish and their warriors, are accusing the attacking nations of coming against Israel to steal their wealth and resources. So after we are returned to our land, other nations are dealing with some of the changes that the children of the fallen are putting in place right now. Then the great judgment will bring everything to an end. What we see is an outline of a millennial map based on ancestral lines. There are clear prophecies regarding restoration for certain nations that descended from Shem and Ham who were displaced. I did not list them all. I'm focusing on the ones we already talked about. But let's remember that for some of these nations, their identities were stolen, and the folks claiming to be them today are imposters. The same thing happened to us, and that's why there was such a concerted effort to erase our history. From Shem, the nation of Israel is the key to their restoration. Assyria is judged, then healed. Moab is judged, then restored. Ammon and Elam also have their captivity restored. From Ham, Egypt is judged and healed. Psalm 68:3 says, Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto Yah. Other remnants are counted among the nations that are left. Again, all are not listed. But for Japheth, there are no clear, explicit restoration prophecies for Japheth's descendants as distinct nations or empires. remnants from his line receive some of Israel's spiritual blessings. Why so few from his lineage? Well, it has to do with nations that are aligned with the beast in the book of Revelation. So we have to trace the rebellion that began in the Garden of Eden. It expanded, and a religious and political structure began with Nimrod in Babylon, a descendant of Ham. But the prophetic pattern based on the book of Daniel is showing the advancement of the imperial system of oppression and captivity that targeted the chosen people. That structure began with Shem. Shem and Japheth share the middle empires of Medo-Persia. Then Japheth takes over and dominates the final empires of Greece and Rome. The beast represented in the book of Revelation is a Japhetic empire because it is clearly a composite of Daniel's beasts. Revelation 13:2 says, "The beast is like a leopard with bear's feet and a lion's mouth." This is a direct reference to Daniel 7's sequence of empires. So it's a fusion of the imperial empires, and it's telling us that the book of Revelation beast is not a new entity. It's the continuation and culmination of the imperial line. Rome is the final beast, a Japhetic imperial line, and Esau's seed is mixed in with Greece and Rome. So we're looking at a Japhetic empire in the last days. We see certain nations that receive national mercy and access to worship, but not all of Israel's covenant rights and blessings. And that part is key. But you see no explicit Japhetic restoration prophecies like Greece, my people, Magog shall bring offerings to Zion, or Javan shall worship in Jerusalem, compared with prophecies like Isaiah 19 concerning Egypt and Assyria, or prophecies about Ethiopia explicitly worshiping. Japhetic nations are not singled out for restoration in the same way. So the final eschatological enemy is Japheth, not Shem or Ham. No Japhetic nation is ever promised a national restoration after judgment. Note that I said no Japhetic nation, not individuals. And now we have to ask why. To answer that question, we have to go back to Noah's words about Japheth being enlarged and how the word Gentile has been defined. We'll pick up there on the live this coming Wednesday, so be sure to join me for that. Please remember to like, share, and hype. You're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. We normally upload messages on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Yah willing. Join me next time.